another thing I've always been curious about is how winemakers get different flavors out of wine. Now, I know this can be very technical. So, generally speaking, if let's say you have a 10-acre vineyard, and you've half of it is planted with Sauvignon Blanc, and well, they're all planted with Sauvignon Blanc, but this batch it tastes like this, and this half tastes like this. How,
Yeah.
in a nutshell, how does a winemaker
Yeah, so there are many things that can influence that. I think from the vineyard, the cropping level. So especially when you talk Pinot Noir, if you've got a much lower cropping level in the vineyard, those wines, if you think about it, they're going to have more bang for their buck in terms of their tannin and their colour, because that one plant is putting all its energy into ripening fewer bunches. Okay.
when you say cropping, so they'll have less grapes on the vine.
Less grapes on the vine for the more expensive ones that are bigger and
Okay.
and and also, as a winemaker, the picking decision. So if we talk Sauvignon Blanc, if you pick the fruit very, very early at lower Brix and higher acid, those wines tend to be much greener. Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Greener. So you get more of that cut grass, capsicum, those kind of flavors.
Okay.
Leave the fruit on the vine for a much longer time to ripen, and the difference between 19 Brix and 22 Brix is a huge amount in terms of its phenological ripeness. So those riper grapes, they tend to be more of at the tropical end, the much riper passion fruit, sort of stone fruity kind of characters. Then you can bring, skin contact in, or hand picking. If you hand pick the fruit, then you don't get a lot of those kind of racy kind of flavors either, because a lot of those flavors are contained in the skins.
So I'm sorry. So when you handpick, that adds to the labor, which adds to the cost. So that's another aspect.
And also, those wines tend to be. I mean, we make a wine that we handpick and whole cluster press into old barrels and wild ferment it in a little bit of Malo. So that Sauvignon is much more food friendly, and it's not as in your face. You don't get whacked around the head with a million different flavors. Whereas the one that we pick by machine, and you rupture that berry, and a lot of those sort of precursors to those slightly more aggressive flavors are in the skins. If you machine pick it and ferment it cold in a stainless steel tank with a selected yeast, you're going to get a wine that, those wines look like chalk and cheese. They're completely different.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then there's different yeasts, and then you can leave the ferment on its fermentation leaves for longer without sulfuring. In terms of Chardonnay, you can put it through Malo or not, and change the acid profile. There's lots of things that you can play around with to influence, the final flavor of the wine.
So I used to be a chef, so it's like it's kind of basically winemakers are in a way like chefs. You have recipes, so to speak, where you can do this or that, and it'll okay, now that makes more sense. And to your point about leaving the fruit on longer, I guess an extreme example of that would be like some of the German wines.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Sauterne.
Right.
Ages until you get botrytis, and then pick those little raisins, and again you've got this really concentrated, full-on, really, really sweet, viscous juice that turns into something completely different.
What you mentioned, some of the grapes you use come from close proximity to the ocean, correct? What benefit or lack of benefit, however you want to put it, what does close proximity to the ocean do for grapes?
Where we are in this Marlborough Valley, it was formed gazillions of years ago. It's a river valley, and so over years and time, lots of those kind of the soils closer to the sea tend to be very, very. They're really dense. They're higher in sort of silty content, so they have much higher water holding capacity. So the vines that you can grow down there have a giant motor. They're massive. They're really, really tall, vigorous, and they can carry quite a lot more fruit and ripen a lot more fruit than vines that might be grown in sort of more stony or more sandy soils that have less water holding capacity and less nutrient. again, it just gives you a completely different flavor in the wine.
And if I'm not mistaken, being closer to the ocean means you're going to get an ocean breeze, which should help retain the acidity levels, correct?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It is slightly cooler there in the evening. Yeah.
The air. Oh, okay, okay. What you know, I know a little bit about New Zealand wine. I mean, I know my basics, and I know how to sell it. Because I've been in the business a while. But what are like some pros and cons you feel are within, just say, the Marlborough region where your wine's from? That every region has its pros and cons. What do you feel are the benefits of that region and the challenges?
I mean, the big benefit, I mean, New Zealand as a whole is a really, really young winemaking nation, okay? So the first commercial vines were only planted in the early 70s. So our industry is still, when we say, oh, our vines have got some age, some of those might be 20 years old, they're not that old. And also, I think, so we've come a long way, and we're still learning where we should be planting specific varieties, specific clones in terms of the region. I think the regions we've got kind of sorted, but within a region, depending on the soil, what grows best where. So I think the early days, we were learning a lot about that. But for me, I think probably one of the cons is, I think, possibly our over-reliance on Sauvignon Blanc. Everyone knows that Marlborough grows Sauvignon Blanc, right? End of story. But we also grow beautiful Chardonnay and Riesling and our Pinot. So I think we need to, for me, it's just about, letting the world know that we're not just a one-trick pony. We do other things quite well. The pro for me, oh my God, I live in paradise. We don't have street signals, we don't have stops, lights. So small town, but that has, its cons as well when everyone thinks they know your business. But yeah, we live in paradise. It's beautiful. In terms of the wine industry, the big pro is that everyone is very collegial. This is not rocket science what we do. So you help out your mates. If someone phones and says, hey, can you come and have a look at a wine because I'm not sure what's going on here and I'd like a second opinion, you do that. And I love that,
I would assume winemaking is like when I was a chef, it's always nice when somebody says, oh, that was a wonderful meal or whatever. But when I would give cooking classes to people, because I would do that on the side sometimes for fun, and like wilting spinach, the proper way to saute spinach is a side dish. People be like, is that it? I'm like, what do you mean? He said, well, is that how you do it in 5-star? I said, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, but it's well, but it's really all about the quality product to begin with. And then just doing the basics correctly and respecting the food. So I would assume it's the same with wine.
Same. I mean, and everyone talks about wine being made in the vineyard, and it's true. If you've got good fruit, if you muck it up, you really should, retrain as something else. If you've got good fruit, you should be able to make a good wine. I think sometimes, in our years that are slightly more difficult in terms of weather, if you can still make a good wine, then that, I think, sets apart, good winemakers from ones that aren't as good.
Yeah. Could you please just, and this is something that you could probably give a 1-hour answer, but just basically just break down how wine is made. You start with the grapes. In your case, you source them. Somebody grows them for you. And then just the basics.
The basics. So if we talk white wine
let's say the Sauvignon Blanc. How about that?
Sauvignon Blanc, we usually harvest it by machine. So usually in the middle of the night when it's nice and.
Oh, I'm sorry. A what machine?
By a machine. So we use it's mechanically harvested.
Okay.
Just because a machine can cover a lot of hectares in a short space of time with very little labour. So we machine harvest it, the fruit comes into the winery and it's basically pumped into a press, which is basically just a big, if you can imagine, a big cylinder on a horizontally, and air is pumped behind a big membrane bag, and that bag pushes the skins and the juice against some screens, and the juice flows out. It's really simple, but very cool. So that juice is pumped into a tank, and then just like, if you buy orange juice that has pulp in it, I mean, that's exactly what it looks like, okay? But it's sort of luminescent green with pulp. And over the next sort of 48 hours, we just let it sit, and, gravity is our friend, it takes over, that settles in the tank, and then we decant the clear juice from the top into another tank. So we just basically pump the clear juice into another tank beside it. And the sludgy stuff at the bottom gets put through a filter to recover the juice from that. And that goes into the tank, and then it's simple. You warm it up. You pitch in some yeast. Once it starts to ferment, then, and this is, I think, one of the, my favorite bit of technology is refrigeration. Those flavors, to retain those nice, bright, juicy, yummy aromatics in white wine, you need to ferment the juice quite cool. So at peak fermentation, most of our Sauvignons would be fermented around 9 or 10 degrees Celsius, which maybe, 45?
Yeah. I know that 28 Celsius is 82 Fahrenheit. That's
we don't want it that hot, but the Pinot gets that hot. That's yeah. Okay. And then you ferment it until the yeast have, metabolized all the sugar.
How long does that take?
And then,
approximately.
From start to finish, I would say around 3 weeks.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And is that it? Is that, in a nutshell, is that basically it?
In a nutshell, that's it. And then we basically chill it down again. Sauvignon would rack onto some sulfur, which we use as a preservative.
Right.
And we do that we keep all the blocks separate so that we can evaluate, the flavors post fermentation.
Okay.
And that gives you a good idea of, that's like that because of whatever in the vineyard. So that's white wine. So we don't ferment it on the skins. Red wine, a lot of most of the colour and the tannin is in the skins of the grapes. So we ferment it a bit differently. So the fruit will come into the winery, we'll put it into the tank, and it's on those skins.
Right. No skin, no colour.
Yeah, fermented quite warm. So around 80, it would get up to 85 Fahrenheit quite easily, and that helps with that colour extraction. And then post-fermentation, we'll squeeze it to separate the skins from the wine.
And if I'm not mistaken, the cheaper wines out there, the lower quality wines, when you're separating the juice from all of that other sledge and stuff, they'll actually press it more to get more out of it, right? And then when you do that, you get more impurities and stuff. Is that because that? Am I right?
Possibly just get some of those tannins that you might end up having to fine out at a later stage. So we tend to not squeeze it too much. Yeah.
Kind of like olive oil, if I'm not mistaken. A good quality olive oil is the same way. They press it, but you don't go too hard because you'll push through some of the stuff you don't really want.
Yeah, the stuff that makes it taste a little bit more bitter or astringent and things like that. Which, I mean, you just don't want that.